Back in the 1970s, when I was in graduate school in New York, I was offered a modest salary to teach at Carleton. The only other person I knew who came from Ottawa was Laurence Kardish. So I approached him for advice as to whether to take the job. He told me that his parents owned the Rideau Bakery, and if I bought my bread there and said that I knew Larry, his mother would throw in a few free date squares. Based on the promise of endless free date squares, I accepted the offer. So I can say that Larry Kardish changed my life, and I'm not the only person who can claim this. Many an artist can say the same, and for more substantial reasons. Laurence Kardish is the senior curator in the Department of Cinema and Media at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. He's been honored with an officier of the French Order of Arts and Letters, the German Bundesverdienstkreuz, and the Korean Meritorious Recognition Gift. But it all started here at Carleton, where Larry Kardish, a philosophy student, immersed himself in the performing arts. As co-founder of the Carleton University Cine Club in 1964, he curated his first film programs. This led to work at the Canadian Film Institute and directing a film seminar for Carleton's English department. Connections made there resulted in a move to New York, where during completion of graduate work at Columbia University, he found a job as the assistant director of the Filmmakers Distribution Center. This led to employment in the Department of Film at the Museum of Modern Art, from whence he advanced to his current position. Laurence Kardish's career has been marked by innovation. At the Filmmakers Distribution Center, he helped to establish the reputation of such independent filmmakers as Andy Warhol and Kenneth Anger. At MoMA, he curated the first North American film retrospective of African cinema, the first complete film retrospectives of artists such as John Cassavetes, Melvin Van Peebles, Rainier Werner Fassbinder, and Isabelle Huppert. He began the Premieres series, where film and media art from around the world received its American or world introduction, premiering works by Wes Anderson, Yoko Ono, Jean-Luc Godard, Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese, and Ulrike Oettinger, among others. Many Kardish-curated exhibitions resulted in contributions to MoMA's film collection, such as his 25th anniversary retrospective of Miramax films, which brought a selection of Miramax films like Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, Kieslowski's Red, White, and Blue trilogy, Jane Campion's The Piano, and Canadian director Denis Arcand's The Barbarian Invasions into MoMA's possession. Laurence Kardish's career has celebrated cinema as an art and educated the public about the work of film masters. His expertise brings together both those working in commercial cinema and the avant-garde. Mr. Chancellor, in recognition of a distinguished career and learned contribution to film and arts culture worldwide, and for his continuing devotion to Canadian cinema and Carleton University, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, upon Laurence Kardish.
By virtue of my authority, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa.
Mr. Chancellor, Madam President, Vice Chair of the Board of Governors, Professor Langer, distinguished members of the university, students, parents, and guests. Because I believe my years at Carleton were so critical in positive ways to my intellectual, social, and moral development, I am deeply moved by the honor you have chosen to bestow on me. And as a happy obligation that comes with this honor, I have been asked to give a short inspirational address to the graduating class. This really has confounded me, though. Not the obligation, but how I might perform it. Do I speak about myself, or do I prescribe a set of guidelines to live by? Since I'm not certain what is most appropriate, I will do a brief verbal jig, mixing and matching autobiography and modest edicts. I have had the great fortune, and I do understand how special this is, to have been working in one place for 43 years, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I began as a curatorial assistant and moved through the ranks to senior curator. So here comes the first recommendation. Be flexible, supple, and adaptable to your professional situation, because the world changes around you and with you, ceaselessly, constantly, often in subtle ways, but sometimes with great jolts. When I joined MoMA staff in 1968, I became a member of the museum's Department of Film, which until 2 years before my arrival was simply known as MoMA's Film Library. It was not until 1966 did film become a separate curatorial department at the museum, even though when the museum was founded in 1929 by 3 women of enormous privilege, it was established with the idea, original, provocative, and radical at the time, that film was an art. Indeed, it was the art that was peculiar to the 20th century, that should be collected, exhibited, studied, and enjoyed, like the other arts like painting and sculpture. In between the years of 1968 and 2010, the Department of Film first became the Department of Film and Video. Then a few years later, it became the Department of Film and Media. And then when the museum decided that installation art should have its own set of coordinates, we reverted to being the Department of Film, and the museum established another department, the Department of Media, which last year became the Department of Media and Performance Art. And I suspect that that's not going to remain for a long time. There'll be more changes. The irony, of course, is that today the Department of Film deals with just as much digital media and bytes as it does with that glorious, glorious analog, the chemical medium of photosensitive celluloid. But that's part of what I'm suggesting and recommending to you, that when change happens, when the playing field is reshaped and resized, appreciate what is happening. Try to understand what compels the change. And once you appreciate why this transformation is happening, even though you may not agree with it, nor embrace it, please don't waste your energy, which is, after all, is limited in protesting or in resisting publicly what might be A, irresistible, and B, out of your hands, which could be put to better use in private persuasion. Keep trying to persuade, though. When I arrived at Carleton, I was not certain what I wanted to become in life. I did not want to be the doctor or lawyer my mother said I should become, probably for the simple reason I did not want anyone other than myself to determine my future. A neighborhood friend said he would major in philosophy at Carleton, and at that time, that seemed intriguing because I really did not know what the discipline really meant, other than it was intellectually adventuresome, and I was up for a challenge. So philosophy it was, and my life changed. I found thinking about thought, generating, and trying to articulate ideas absolutely exhilarating, particularly when I realized that what I had previously thought were simple ideas, like left and right, or right and wrong, to name just a few, were actually incredibly complex. And thinking about them led me into such diverse fields that I wouldn't have expected, like geometry and poetry. I had the advantage of being taught by the most amazing set of scholars at Carleton, who were at once patient with their students and committed to what they were teaching. And their enthusiasm was conveyed to all of us who stayed with the program throughout our undergraduate years. It was there in the classroom, sitting and arguing with the same set of students over 3 or 4 years, I made close friends and realized that the camaraderie that developed within a closed situation where mutual interests and experiences were shared, as were the approvals and disapprovals of our elders, the teachers, we were a family, related not by blood, but by an academic consanguinity. We're as close as siblings, so to speak. And when we graduated, and each went his own separate ways, it was a guy group then, and to different cities, a number of us kept in touch. And this is my second prescription. Maintain some of the friendships you made over the past few years. They don't have to be many, and you may have to take the initiative. You've had experiences with your fellow students that no one else has had. And these experiences have informed you, and I hope enriched rather than diminished you. But unless you want to be isolated in later life, these friendships will provide you with another sense of belonging. They will count for a lot, and they are an emotional harbor to be sailed into on occasion. Carleton was not all study. Carleton encouraged, and I suspect it still does, seeing this magnificent building, extracurricular activities that were social in nature, whether sports or arts. Now, since I'm a very reluctant athlete, I chose to curl off campus. But I also joined Sock and Buskin, where I wrote and directed plays. However, my happiest activity, and the one that ultimately set me on the path that I was to take to New York, was my co-founding of the Carleton University Cine Club, which I did once I read in the newly built Carleton Library, a Sunday New York Times article about a group of films that were being made in the US in the early 60s and the mid-60s. And these films were called experimental, avant-garde, but most thrillingly, underground. I wanted to see these films, but Ottawa, as was the province of Ontario in 63, 64, was very proper, decent, safe, socially homogenized, and dull. Movie theaters were closed on Sundays. Censorship was strict for public screenings, but somewhat looser for private film societies. I know that Ottawa University had a film club, but Carleton did not. So a friend and I created one. The administration here blessed this enterprise, that is, until we brought in our first underground films, Kenneth Anger's Scorpio Rising and Jack Smith's Flaming Creatures. And it was interesting to see the faculty and students exposed to such provocations, but the administration questioned this, but only briefly, and quite wisely, and I bless it, allowed the club to continue and permit the deepening of an appreciation of cinema beyond Hollywood to take place on campus. After all, the club was a membership organization and no student was obliged to join. When I began the club, I knew very little about the physical nature of film itself. I thought all films were made in 16 millimeter. It was only when Carleton's projectionist asked me if the films were 35 or 16 that I knew I was in trouble. I did educate myself quickly. And so here's another prescription. Although it is always good to be well informed, sometimes ignorance is indeed bliss. Or rather, being ignorant at times may be necessary to take some action. Had I really known what would have been involved in starting a film society, had I truly appreciated that the films had to clear through customs, had to be shipped in certain ways that were so fragile, I don't know if I would have moved so quickly. Sometimes knowledge inhibits action. What you don't know may encourage your ambition. Of course, though, it might also kill you, too. So I'm not too certain what I'm advising here, except I don't encourage not knowing, but I do encourage self-starting. However, there are times when not knowing and self-starting are incompatible, but you guys will have to figure that out. So it is 1966, and the Cine Club is bringing in films that would not otherwise be seen in Ottawa. And this is my honors BA year, and I receive a phone call from the English department asking if I would direct a summer program over a long weekend in film on campus. And again, not quite appreciating what would be involved, I said, sure. And I designed a several-day program in which those who signed up would collaboratively make a film, which I wonder if they're still on campus, see films, and have some major film critics and historians, the field was then still very new, give some talks. The budget for such an endeavor was limited. Otherwise, I would have invited someone from London to speak, but I settled on guests from New York. At this point, I had been accepted into 2 graduate programs, the inaugural year of the University of Sussex's History of Ideas program and Columbia University's School of the Arts Master's program in film, radio, and television. And I was really torn between the 2 possibilities. It was when my American guests said if I come to New York, they would help me find a part-time job that made the decision for me, because I rather like the idea of simultaneously studying and earning a modest salary. And the job they found me, although I didn't know it at the time, was exceptional. It was working as an office assistant for the New American Cinema Group, also known as the Underground, trying to place the films of artists like Andy Warhol and Shirley Clark and Jonas Mekas, all of whom I met, into commercial theaters. However, as soon as the theaters realized that Underground was an aesthetic movement and not a salacious one, they stopped booking the films. But in the meantime, I won a first-class hands-on education about art and artists that had little to do with what I was learning at Columbia, which came at film from another vector, film as a vehicle for mass communications. But it did prepare me for my eventual life at MoMA. The invitation from Carleton's English department came as a surprise, as did the offer of assistance from the New Yorkers. Both were unexpected and welcome, and I had no idea at the time how important these events would be in my life, which brings me to my final recommendation. Embrace serendipity. It may not be as accidental as it would appear. I'm not so sentimental as to suggest that everything happens for a reason, but life is out of the blue wondrous, and it is your choice and yours alone to take advantage of the sudden gifts that may come your way. Thank you.